My name is Jamie Bramberger. I manage student and community affairs here at Algonquin College. We're delighted to have Susan and Richard back in town for Susan's book launch of Beyond Belief, which you're about to hear a lot more about in just a few moments. As a college, we are absolutely delighted to host Susan's book launch here tonight, as we are very proud of everything that she has accomplished. You may not know that Susan is the only Pembroke Campus graduate in more than 50 years of this campus existing to have won a prestigious Premier's Award. These are annual awards that are handed out to Ontario College graduates. And if you think about that, there are 24 colleges in Ontario. There are thousands of graduates every year, and they hand out about 5 or 6 of these awards. Susan won one of those awards in 2004, not surprisingly, for the work that she and Richard were doing in Guatemala, a story that all of you now know very, very well. Susan and Richard spent almost 20 years in the impoverished country, helping children and families through their work, setting up schools and early childhood centers. Their work transformed lives. We saw some of that in the video. Susan has described her new book as spiritual, as it shares the incredible story of how she and Richard ended up leaving Pembroke, their comfortable lives here in the Ottawa Valley, to embark on a remarkable humanitarian mission. There is no question that the world is a better place because of the contribution that this couple has made through their unselfish acts of kindness and compassion. And now Susan is sharing her story through her writing, how it all happened. So now please welcome Canada's newest author, Susan Schmaltz.
Hugs, we hug.
Hugs, okay, we hug. Yeah, we can do that.
Thank
too.
you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Boy. It is so wonderful to see all of you here. It's absolutely amazing. I'm really happy to be here. Not here, but here. Beyond belief. It took me months, can you hear me? It took me months to come up with the title for this book. The original title was Out of My Mind. Maybe once you have read the book, you may come to the conclusion, I should have stuck with my first instinct. The reality was that only when I could move beyond the limiting constraints of logic and reason that I was able to see and access the realm of infinite possibilities. And marijuana wasn't even legal yet. When I made outrageous decisions that flew in the face of everything that made sense to me, I was in fact, quite literally, out of my mind. In the end, however, I opted for a less self-deprecating title and decided to go with Beyond Belief. Because when my daughter heard it, she said, out of your mind? No, Mom. I want to tell you what is beyond belief for me. It is beyond belief that I am here tonight actually having written a book. I was never a writer. I wasn't even a reader. My father offered to pay me 10 cents a day if I would please just read the front page of the newspaper. Though 10 cents was big money in those days, I just couldn't do it. When I got to university and had to write a report on the tale of two cities, when I saw the size of the book, I panicked. I was so desperate that I paraphrased the author's summary of the book, which was written on the cover. I still can't remember why I failed English that year, but I think that might have had something to do with it. It is also beyond belief that I am about to share this deeply personal autobiography with strangers. But what is really beyond belief is the story you're about to read. Truthfully, I have been feeling pretty vulnerable lately. I am probably second-guessing most of what I have written, not because it isn't true, but because it is of a highly spiritual nature, and generally we don't share that part of ourselves with others. I know you have all had the experience where weird thoughts kind of go through your mind, and you think, oh, God, I would die if somebody knew what I was thinking. Well, that's absolutely the way I felt. Only I wrote those thoughts down in a book for all to see, and so now, at this moment, I want to die. The reason I wrote this book is because it is an incredible story, believe it or not. Some of you may scoff at my apparent misguided musings, and I don't blame you. If you had shared this extraordinary account with us 30 years ago, I at best would have been skeptical, and well, Richard just would have rolled his eyes back into his head. Well, that was then, and this is now. Originally, I did not intend for this book to be an autobiography. It is only as I began to ponder why I would even give credence to such unbelievable occurrences that I realized that I am a product of every person and every idea I have ever encountered in my life. And in order to really understand this story, you need to be aware of the key experiences that have shaped me as a human being. So I know there's some of you here who will not be able to relate to the spiritual part. Well, perhaps your interest may lie in what on earth would this cause this crazy woman to think like that? There are two primary emotions. One is fear, and the other is love. Initially, even the thought of this mission invoked in the two of us a lot of fear. As I reflect on what I have written thus far, I realize that I'm still acting out of fear. Fear of criticism, fear of ridicule, fear of not being believed. But most of all, honestly, just fear of looking stupid. But what almost 20 years in the mission field have taught me is that if we want to affect positive change in this world, we need to move past our fears. We need to own who we are and why we are here. Mark Twain once said, "The two most important days of our lives are the day we are born and the day we find out why." Reflecting on the day I was born, I would like to share with you a kind of a fun piece from the book. Chapter 18, Strange Happenings. Every aspect of our lives was affected by synchronistic occurrences. It was my birthday, July 10th, 1997. I was just finishing up my last day of nursing practicum in obstetrics at the Arnprior Hospital. There was 1 hour left before we were to go home. I was telling a fellow student how disappointed I was that I had never had a chance to witness a baby being born. Within minutes, a nurse came bounding into the room. "Susan, a lady is about to give birth. I will ask if you can come and observe." Before I knew it, I was standing over the distressed mother, and the doctor was sitting in front of her holding out his hands, ready to catch the baby. I was terrified. As I stood there in awe, I was thinking about how grateful I was to be there, when, as had happened before, an unlikely scenario was imprinted on my mind. In honor of the day of my birth, this child was going to be named after me. Before I really had time to process the thought, the slippery newborn came flying out into the doctor's hands. I gasped as it came out so fast I thought he was going to drop it. "You have a lovely little girl." "Uh-huh," he said to the mother as he placed the baby on her stomach. I had to steel myself to give the pair time to bond before I asked, "Do you have a name picked out yet?" My heart was pounding as I waited for her to say, "Susan." "Yes," she said. "We're going to call her Taylor." I felt instant shame. That I had considered that this baby would be named after me. Then it suddenly occurred to me that the name that I was actually born with, the name that would have been hung over my hospital crib on the day 51 years ago, was baby Taylor. I could not contain my joy. As I literally skipped down the hallway to go back to this student's lounge, I noticed someone out of the corner of my eye laughing at me. Little did she know what had just transpired. And little did I know why. Who cares? Maybe it was just one more crazy coincidence, but I just couldn't wait to get home and tell Richard. I'm having trouble reading the book. The print's pretty small, and the lights are... Okay. The two most important days of our lives are the day we are born and the day we find out why. Though we were constantly plagued with doubt, there came a day that both of us were convinced that we were to go to Guatemala. But neither of us could fathom why. Chapter 27, why? This one's out there. On July 16th, 1998, okay, I'm just having a little trouble with the light here. Maybe I'm going to stand like this. This is better. This is better. All right. On July 16th, 1998, I went to bed early because I was very tired and discouraged. It had been clear to me that we were to go to Guatemala, but what I could not wrap my head around was, why? Why us? And what was the reason? As I was falling asleep, though I never really expected an answer, I simply asked God, why do you want us to go to Guatemala? Earlier that evening, I had been reading about all the horrible violence in Guatemala. The homicides, the femicides, the torture, the rape, the massive number of massacres that occurred during the 36-year-long war. And though peace had been officially declared in 1996, 2 years later, the disappearances and atrocities continued. I'm not going to lie to you. It scared the hell out of me. However, the real challenge for us was that we could see no point in sending a couple of middle-class, English-speaking North Americans into the fray. How could we possibly help? Richard came to bed around midnight. He woke me up and I couldn't get back to sleep, so I went downstairs so that I wouldn't disturb him. Finally, at about 1 a.m., I fell asleep. About an hour later, a flash came into my head. Woke me up, but my eyes were still closed. To the left of my vision, I saw a large man. I told you it was going to be far out. I saw a large man with light brown skin and a turban on his head. He looked prosperous, and he was wearing a robe like in the time of Jesus. Suddenly, my eyes popped open, and as I looked out the patio door at the end of the couch, my gaze fixed on one incredibly bright star. When you think that I was coming out of a deep sleep, it must have been beyond bright for me to instantly I was fixed on, oh my God, that's so big. It was the only star that I could see in the sky, and I thought of the Star of Bethlehem. Remembering the appearance of the image in my mind, I then realized that the figure clearly looked like one of the traditional images of the three wise men. I thought about how God had led the three kings to Bethlehem by showing them a place marked by a brilliant star. This was kind of all instantaneously. I didn't sit there for hours thinking about this. As I moved my head slightly on the pillow, I saw a half moon. To the left of the star, shining equally as bright. At that moment, I began to think that the answer to my question had been revealed to me, and it seemed so simple. I believe it was about each of us bringing our light, our gifts, our talents, our service, our love, to help bring wholeness to those who thirst for equality and peace in Guatemala. Secondly, as the story of the wise men, we need to return to our countries and tell our stories about their struggles, bringing a new consciousness to all who will listen. That night, though I still had no idea how, where, or what was going to take place, I knew why, and that has made all the difference. Those of you who know us really well know that Richard and I are two very different people. I think of myself as an idealist. Richard sees me as a dreamer, impractical, impulsive, and at times flaky. Richard, on the other hand, considers himself a pragmatist. I see him as practical to the extreme, irritatingly rational, and at times a definite rain cloud. Needless to say, when we were trying to sort out our differences, at times the fur would fly. Chapter 16, meaning. Accepting that something of a supernatural nature was happening to us was almost impossible. And for Richard, it was, at times, a source of great irritation. I vividly recall a heated discussion we had shortly after my first few dreams. Richard seemed to be more open to the idea of doing missionary work than he was of going to Guatemala. Then one day he threw down the gauntlet and said, "Susan, why do we have to go to Guatemala?" "I don't know, Richard." "Well, what are we going to do there?" "I don't know, Richard." "But why Guatemala? Why can't we go to Africa?" "I would rather go to Africa, but I know we're supposed to go to Guatemala." "What do you mean you know?" "I truly believe we are supposed to go to Guatemala in 3 years." In 3 years? What are you talking about, Susan? I can't retire for 5 years. What about my pension? I understand, Richard. I don't know what to say. The next day, we were listening to the radio when it was announced on the news that the Ontario Minister of Education was asking teachers over the age of 55 to consider taking early retirement without financial penalty to make room for younger teachers. Shocked by what I had heard, I said, Richard, did you hear that? Arrogantly, he said, it's just talk, Susan. It's never going to happen. Well, guess who turned 55 in 3 years? And guess who took early retirement? And guess who went to Guatemala? The front cover of the book depicts a seemingly innocuous dream about washing walls. It was a dream that ultimately sent us to Guatemala. I'd like to finish with this. The Looming Elephant. As the mission grew closer, the elephant in the room got larger. There were so many huge issues we had to deal with. Richard's retirement, the sale of most of our material belongings, the care of our property while we were away, a home for our kitty, health insurance, home insurance, life insurance, and numerous legal documents. The list went on and on. Though we put on a brave face, when we actually acknowledged the enormity of the task, we felt overwhelmed. What if we got sick in Guatemala? Or worse yet, killed? What if after all these years of preparation, we just couldn't take the heat, both physically and metaphorically? What if we weren't young enough or strong enough to fulfill our commitment? What if something serious happened to one of our children? Any one of those disasters would have sounded the death knell for our mission. For me, the biggest challenge was to keep the faith, trusting that we were not alone and that everything was going to be okay. Some days were good, and some days were bad, and then others were even worse. Journal entry, June 27th, 1999. I hit the wall today. I am confused, discouraged, and afraid. But I'm not angry, and I'm not ready to quit. I went to my dream binder and wrote the following. Questions for you, God. From the depths of my soul came a dream. A very simple dream about washing walls. And 3 years later, this very simple dream still runs my life. I thought it meant that we could make a difference. I thought it was a calling. I thought this dream was important, and now I don't know what to think. Since that simple dream, I have journeyed. It has been peaceful, and I have changed. Or have I? Maybe I just think I have. Anyway, it seems to me that I have changed. The dream brought me so much hope, and I was so excited to be part of it. I thought God was asking me to do something, and I said yes. You showed me a place, or was I delusional? Did I just want to be shown a place? I don't know anymore. I'm trying so hard to get this right. What do you want from me, God? I'm here. I'm listening, but I don't hear anything. I'm confused. I'm scared, not to mention embarrassed. But I'm still ready to do it. For your sake, God, what is it? From the depths of my soul came a dream. a very simple dream about washing walls. Is that all it was? In God's time, not my time, the questions were answered. As long as I lived in the now, life unfolded as it should. When I fearlessly focused on the mission, everything flowed. But of course, being human, I struggled invariably with everything that did not fit the norm. Over time, I learned to let go and rest in the mystery. And almost 20 years later, I am still resting in the same mystery. Amen. Even though I said all those bad things about Richard,
Nice try, honey.
he's the love of my life, and I dedicated the book to him.
Yeah, gentlemen, sometimes you just don't do very well. Anyhow, first of all, I'd like to thank Jamie and Jody and Sean. This is phenomenal. I keep remembering Algonquin on Pembroke Street, and I'm thinking, oh dear God, this is a palace. And look how beautifully they prepared it for all of us this evening. And of course, it was so awesome to be surrounded by people who have been so supportive and have journeyed with us in so many different capacities. However, Susan did declare that she was struggling. She kept saying, what if they think I'm crazy? And I said, well, they don't have to read the book, honey. They could come to me. Well, maybe the fact that she is crazy, that she's put up with me for 51 years. Kind of a sidelight. I'd like to draw your attention to the cover of the book. Now, I think that is so prophetic. What occurred 52 years ago? Our kids never believed the story that maybe their mother proposed to me. That Susan let this go through, which wasn't even her idea initially, I think was one of those Freudian slips. A vindicator. Now, the second proposal was her invitation to journey with her to Guatemala. She underscored in polite language my attitude to what she was trying to drag us to. There goes my damn RV. There goes my trips around Canada. And I did fight with it really up until the very near end. And the interesting thing is, when I finally kind of gave in, I don't know, guys, if you've ever been there, and it's just sometimes, you know, it's time to give in, a certain peace came over me. And somehow at one level, it seemed incredibly correct. Now, the third proposal is you guys. It doesn't matter after reading the book whether you really question it or even give it any credence. You have to look at this room full of people who responded to the third proposal, which was come and join us. All that furniture you saw, all those school supplies, we had painters come down. Every bit of that was done by many people in this room. So what caused them to come down? Were we just the conduit? I don't know. but it was phenomenal. And many of the people who didn't come down supported us in other ways. Do you know that over 100 people, different people from the greater Ottawa Valley, that's stretching down to Maxwell up to Deep River, yeah, Alex, I had to, whatever, to Madawaska, it's just incredible. And that they've been coming down for 14 years, some of them every year, and I think Tim and maybe, I'm not too sure who else may have doubled up a couple of times, and it came down twice in 1 year, giving up their holidays from work and paying their own way. And as a matter of fact, in 2 days, Ted's taking a team of 21 down to Guatemala to build 4 homes. So something did happen to the crazy lady, and the cynical husband. And I just want to point out that even though we had it from Western Canada and the Maritimes and some from the States, the majority have always been out of the Ottawa Valley. So the young lady who has taken over for us in planting seeds, whom you received little pieces of paper. She's coming on December the 19th here at the Mother House, so anyone who wishes to meet her, and all the teams know her. But I just wanted to give you the Valley connection. Her mother's her grandmother and grandfather's homestead is in Bulger's Corners. Now, how many people here know Bulger's Corners? Wow, okay. And she came down, 3 minutes, okay. I'm overdue. But you know what? I got the mic. She can't stop me. You know, sometimes, and a few times you get power, you just exercise it. Oh, that'll cost. In 2007, she came down. Her parents foolishly sent her down to us to see if she, because she wanted to do some humanitarian service. And 11 years later, she's still there, and now taking over the next, what I call the next demographic, the new continuing birthing, and she'll be up here on the 19th. Now, okay, I'll sum up, Sue, somewhere here. Oh, yeah. There are some goodies back there, some coffee, tea. There's a bar over here. And most of all, there are books for sale. And just that you're aware of it, that 20% of the net profits will be going to planting seeds in Guatemala.
For tonight only.
Oh, for tonight only! So get it while you can. Okay, and thank you again from the bottom of our heart for taking a time out of your frosty evening.